Whatever else happens, it is said the one thing that no one can ever truly take from you is your name. From the moment the ink dries on your birth certificate to the day your tombstone is chiseled, your given name belongs to you and you alone. In almost the same breath, it is also said that you will never really be dead as long as someone remembers your name. What then of the individuals about whom MysteriousWV first spoke? What then of the John and Jane Does? Since 1958, at least 3 men in southwestern Pennsylvania have been deprived in death of their names. In each individual case, there are tantalizing clues to who they were in life, yet their true identities have inexplicably been erased from history. For our first venture into the Keystone State, MysteriousWV has chosen to profile not one, but all 3 of these tragic cases, where an unfortunate individual has been posthumously robbed of that most precious of all possessions, his name. We begin first in Bedford County, Pennsylvania. On October 9, 1958, members of a pipeline crew were clearing brush in a wooded area about a half a mile north of the Midway service plaza on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. At about 6:30 that morning, Sun Pipeline foreman Guy Adams, along with a 4-man crew, were working along the pipeline's right-of-way when they came upon what appeared to be an abandoned campsite. Within the camp's perimeter, Adams and his men made a grisly discovery. Scattered over a 40-foot area, they found a collection of bones and tattered clothing, which was later identified as human remains. Representatives of the Pennsylvania State Police responded to the rural location. From the start, it was apparent that the remains had been at the location where they were found for quite some time. Virtually all traces of skin and flesh had vanished, leaving behind only bones and bits of sinew. In addition, the scattering of the clothing and bones indicated extensive animal activity had taken place. While most of the skeleton, including the skull and mandible, were found, some portions of the remains were nowhere to be seen. The remains and the abandoned campsite in which they were found yielded a number of clues to the man's identity. Authorities were able to determine that the remains were those of a Caucasian male, initially believed to have been between 20 and 30 years of age, although more recent testing and examinations have revised the age estimation up, placing it between 30 and 35. Several strands of straight, dark brown hair were found affixed to the detached cranium. The skull itself exhibited signs of a massive injury, consistent with that of a projectile from a high-powered rifle. The unknown individual had extensive dental work, including a gold tooth and crown. Although the remains had been scattered, the clothing the man had been wearing at the time of his death was found to be mostly intact. However, it also appeared to be incongruous to the rest of the scene. A well-worn pair of blue denim dungarees were found, along with a pair of gray wool hunting socks, white jockey shorts, a white t-shirt, and black leather engineering boots. A black leather wallet containing $38, but no identification, was also found. The upper portion of the man's body was found to have been clad in a black leather jacket, not the preferred choice of attire for hunters or outdoorsmen. Leather is known to have a low tolerance to moisture, as well as a tendency to exaggerate both hot and cold temperatures rather than provide protection from them. The jacket was later described as having a full-length zipper and slanted pockets. Another set of clothing was also found within the campsite. However, no description of this additional clothing has ever been made public. Curiously, no hat or other form of head protection was found, and all articles of clothing had their tags and labels removed. The John Doe's clothing was not the only thing about the scene that seemed inconsistent with that of a hunter or trapper, and more indicative of a novice camper or a student. State police inventoried a large amount of camping gear and other personal effects, far more than usually associated with a hunting expedition or an individual overnight camper. Authorities had the impression that the man, whoever he was intending to live off the land for an extended period of time. A rusted, high-powered rifle was found near the remains, along with a cloth gun case. The rifle was originally reported to have been a 1903 bolt-action Springfield, though in 2005 the make and model were reported to have been a Remington 721A, which uses the same ammunition as the Springfield, but was not manufactured until 1948. 2 rounds of .30-06 ammunition were found inside the rifle, and several boxes of the same ammunition were found within the campsite. Other outdoor-type items found in and around the scene included a small metal cooking kit, numerous toiletries, a 1-gallon canteen, and a canvas backpack. Seemingly out of place, authorities discovered 3 hardbound textbooks, each of which seemed more suited to a professor or a graduate student. These books were subsequently identified as Reading Poems, Introduction to Critical Study, 100 Modern Poems, and Science and the Modern World. Most notably, authorities also found a plastic contact lens and a brass key. Contact lenses were still extremely expensive in 1958 and considered by most to be a luxury item rather than a necessity. To authorities, this, along with the extensive dental work, pointed to an individual of higher-than-usual financial means rather than a drifter or vagrant. Years later, the lens was traced to an optometrist in Chicago. Sadly, by the time the origin of the lens was determined, the prescribing optometrist had passed away and his list of patients destroyed. The brass key found at the campsite was stamped with the inscription, Active, 195 Avenue A. Authorities later traced this key to the Active Locksmith Company at 195 Avenue A in New York City. The key was described as having been a duplicate cut from an Unger brand blank used primarily for cylinder door locks, night latches, and deadbolts. This type of key was widely produced, and efforts to trace it to a specific lock or person have proved unsuccessful. Taking everything into account, authorities hypothesized that they may be looking either at a disillusioned academic or a once affluent, educated individual who had fallen on hard times, or possibly chosen to follow the path of noted author Jack Kerouac. They conjectured that he may have been what was later described as an individual who had chosen to drop out of society. In the same vein, authorities feel strongly that the man's death was either an accident or a suicide, though they have never completely ruled out the possibility of foul play. In 2004, following a lengthy and controversial debate over the disposition of the Doe's remains, the FBI produced this composite sketch of the unknown male. Despite extensive media attention both in 1958 and beyond, the identity of the man, subsequently dubbed Mr. Bones, remains unknown. Today, the remains of this John Doe, along with other evidence collected from the campsite, reside in an evidence room at the Bedford County Sheriff's Department. The case remains active. 14 years later, and over 50 miles away, another John Doe appeared on the radar, this time in Donegal Township of Washington County, about 15 miles from the West Virginia border. Early on the morning of February 18, 1972, Donald Renz of Avalia, Pennsylvania, was walking along the eastbound lanes of U.S. Route 40 when he, too, made a gruesome discovery. About 60 feet down an embankment and partially hidden by a briar thicket, Renz was able to discern the faint outline of a human body. As was the case with our first John Doe, it was evident that the unfortunate individual had been at the location where he was found for some time. Despite the often harsh chill of the Pennsylvania winter, this John Doe had also been reduced to little more than bones and clothing. Authorities later estimated that he had lain undisturbed by humans in the briar thicket anywhere from 8 to 10 weeks. Roughly 25 feet away, authorities found a bedspread, blanket, and sheet which had been rolled tightly into a ball, indicating that the man may have been hitchhiking or possibly just hiking. However, if he was indeed out for a stroll or a long-distance trek, he did not appear to have had the cold weather in mind. The skeletal remains were found to be clad in a green, long-sleeved, tie-dyed shirt with a 16-inch neck, as well as green-colored dress pants, occasionally referred to as work pants, with flared bottoms. The trousers measured 32 inches around the waist, with an inside leg of 29 inches. The victim was also clad in a pair of jockey shorts, and a black belt was threaded around the green trousers. No socks, shoes, or coat were located. Again, not your typical attire for Washington County in the late fall or winter months. Oddly, all of the pockets on the victim's clothing had been turned inside out, and in a manner eerily similar to our first John Doe, all labels and tags had been removed. Donegal Township, where the remains were located, is situated in west-central Washington County and borders onto Ohio County, West Virginia. The remains were found approximately here, off the eastbound lanes of U.S. Route 40, about 2 miles west of the town of Claysville. At the time, the property where the Doe's remains were found was owned by Stanley Buick, president of a local construction firm known as Foundations Incorporated. The stretch of U.S. Route 40 above where the remains were found is situated high in a valley where heavy winds are quite frequent, thus making travel by foot in cold weather months even less desirable. Based upon the scant evidence found at the scene, the Pennsylvania State Police, along with Chief Pathologist and Deputy Coroner Ernest Abernathy, were able to estimate that the deceased was likely between 45 and 50 years of age when he died. He stood between 5 feet 5 and 5 feet 10 inches tall, weighed approximately 140 to 175 pounds, and appeared to have had brownish-colored hair. Sometime later, a noted anthropologist stated that the John Doe likely had a generally fair to brunette complexion, with a national origin from Western Europe, Great Britain, or Southern Germany. It was later determined that death came, most probably, from 2 gunshot wounds to the man's left torso. Washington County Coroner Farrell Jackson noted a small hole in one of the John Doe's left rib bones. Nearby, the remnants of a .22 caliber slug were found lodged in the rib cage. The John Doe's skull and mandible were recovered intact, and dental information is available to law enforcement upon request. As of the last known update to this case, DNA samples were available, although were still listed as, quote, pending analysis, end quote. Authorities have never stated if they feel this John Doe is native to Washington County or was simply passing through. Our third and final John Doe in southwestern Pennsylvania advances the timeline forward to October 7th, 1991, and back to Bedford County, this time near the small town of Breezewood in East Providence Township. Breezewood lies at the point where Interstate 70 meets and joins the east-west running Pennsylvania Turnpike. It has therefore long been a popular stopping-off point for truckers and motorists alike. It was not far from an on-ramp leading from I-70 to the Breezewood interchange that two bow hunters came upon the scattered remains of yet another unidentified male. Here again, it was apparent from the outset that the unfortunate man had lain in the area where he was found for quite some time, and, once more, animal activity had spread the skeletal remains and other clues over a wide area. Initially, authorities thought the remains might have been those of noted art dealer Arthur Jones. Jones's home had been destroyed in a propane explosion on September 18, 1991. However, the condition of the remains and clothing quickly pointed to a far earlier date of death, perhaps as far back as 2 years. As with each of our two previous cases, a substantial amount of clothing and personal effects were located in and around the area where the remains were found. Clothing found at the scene included a faded light blue button-down shirt with a left breast pocket, a pair of dark blue trousers, an insulated blue nylon jacket with a hood, a badly disintegrated green sweater, a leather belt, and disintegrated socks. Each of the John Doe's feet were found within the remains of a pair of leather, low-quarter work shoes. Scattered about the immediate area, a number of objects presumed to have belonged to the John Doe offered some possible clues as to his identity. In particular, authorities located a pair of black-rimmed prescription eyeglasses with the lenses intact. A leather case for these glasses was also found. Authorities were able to determine the prescription, and this information is available upon request. Also found were a set of keys attached to a key ring, a pair of fingernail clippers, a small Pixie Light brand flashlight which was blue in color, an inexpensive wristwatch with a silver metal band, an empty black leather wallet, and a plastic coin purse containing several coins. With no immediate prospect of identification in sight, the Pennsylvania State Police called in a pathologist to see what could be learned from the remains themselves. It was eventually determined that the John Doe was most likely of Hispanic or mixed racial descent with a strong Mongoloid component. He probably had prominent cheekbones and a flat face. The man would have stood between 5'2" and 5'5" tall, and was likely between 35 and 43 years of age when he died. No definitive cause of death has ever been determined. However, Pennsylvania State Trooper Eric Easton later stated, quote, "There were definite signs of a homicide," end quote. Utilizing the skull and strands of hair found at the scene, a composite sketch of this John Doe has also been created. As the location where the remains were found is very near to a major highway intersection, many have speculated that this John Doe may have been a truck driver. In each of the cases we have profiled, the circumstances surrounding the death of the respective John Doe are extremely suspicious, yet only the case of the Washington County John Doe has been officially ruled a homicide. Authorities, however, are not taking any chances, and all three cases remain open. Yet the same familiar stumbling block remains. It is very difficult to press ahead with a homicide investigation without first knowing the identity of your victim. Therefore, priority one in each of these cases is to return to the victims the one thing taken from them which can still be restored: their names. Please listen and watch closely. Perhaps you can help identify one of our Pennsylvania John Does. John Doe number 1, a.k.a. Mr. Bones, was found in an abandoned campsite roughly a half-mile north of the Midway rest stop of the Pennsylvania Turnpike in Bedford County on October 9, 1958. Death occurred as the result of a single bullet injury to the facial area, and authorities feel that either suicide or homicide are possible. It was estimated that the man had been deceased for approximately 6 months. The rifle which fired the fatal round, a Remington Model 721A, was found near the remains in a rusted condition. 2 rounds of .30-06 ammunition were found inside. The unidentified male was estimated to be between 30 and 35 years of age with brown hair. He stood approximately 6 feet 4 inches tall and is estimated to have weighed between 175 and 200 pounds. He had been wearing a plastic contact lens and had extensive dental work, including a gold crown on the upper right side. When found, he was wearing a black leather jacket with zipper pockets, blue denim dungarees, black leather engineering boots, a black leather belt, and a white T-shirt. All tags and labels had been removed from the clothing. Many personal effects were found scattered around the campsite. In addition to camping-related items, authorities also found 3 hardbound textbooks. The books found at the campsite were Reading Poems, An Introduction to Critical Study, 100 Modern Poems by Selden Rodman, and Science and the Modern World by Alfred North Whitehead. Also found was a brass key stamped with the inscription, Active, 195 Avenue A. Authorities later traced this key to the Active Locksmith Company at 195 Avenue A in New York City. The key was a duplicate, and efforts to connect it to any name or location have been unsuccessful. In addition to Pennsylvania, it is believed the man may have also had ties to Indiana, Ohio, and Illinois. John Doe No. 2, a.k.a. the Washington County John Doe, was found in a briar thicket about 60 feet down an embankment off the eastbound lane of U.S. Route 40 in Donegal Township, about 2 miles west of Claysville. It was estimated that the man's remains had been at the location for at least 8 to 10 weeks. The man had been shot twice in the left torso by a .22 caliber weapon. This John Doe was determined to have been between 45 and 50 years of age when he died. He likely stood between 5 feet 5 and 5 feet 10 inches tall, had brown hair, and weighed between 140 and 175 pounds. Anthropological tests have determined that the man probably had a fair to slightly brunette complexion and estimated that his national origin was likely from Western Europe, the British Isles, or southern Germany. This rough sketch shows what John Doe No. 2 might have looked like. When found, John Doe No. 2 was wearing a green long-sleeve tie-dyed shirt with a 16-inch neck, as well as green-colored dress pants, occasionally referred to as work pants, with flared bottoms. The trousers measured 32 inches around the waist with an inside leg of 29 inches. The victim also was clad in a pair of jockey shorts, and a black belt was threaded around the green trousers. No socks, shoes, or coat were located. All of the pockets on the victim's clothing had been turned inside out, and, much like John Doe No. 1, the labels and tags had all been removed. John Doe No. 3 was found in Breezewood, Pennsylvania, also in Bedford County, on October 7, 1991. The remains were found not far from a ramp which connects Interstate 70 with the Breezewood interchange of the Pennsylvania Turnpike. It was estimated that the man had died approximately 2 years prior to being found. This John Doe was determined to have been of mixed or possibly Hispanic ancestry with a strong Mongoloid component. He had prominent cheekbones, a flat face, and dark hair. At the time of his death, he is estimated to have been between 35 and 43 years of age. He would have stood between 5 feet 2 and 5 feet 5 inches tall. His weight cannot be determined. At the time of his death, the man had been wearing a faded light blue button-down shirt with a left breast pocket, dark blue pants, a green sweater, an insulated blue nylon jacket with a hood, a leather belt, socks, and a pair of leather low-quarter work shoes. A pair of black-framed prescription eyeglasses and leather case were found near the remains. The prescription is known, but has not been made public. Other personal effects found included an empty black leather wallet, a pair of fingernail clippers, a keyring with attached keys, a small blue Pixie Light flashlight, and a plastic coin purse containing a number of coins. The most recent date on the coins found with the remains was 1988. All three of these John Does are being handled by their respective branch of the Pennsylvania State Police. If you have any information concerning the identity or death of these three men, please contact the appropriate branch of the Pennsylvania State Police via the means of contact provided in the video's description.